They laughed, not nervously, not in disbelief. They laughed the way powerful men laugh when they believe they still control the world. On the morning of August 6, 1945, inside a reinforced conference room in Tokyo, several senior officers of the Imperial Japanese Army dismissed the first reports from Hiroshima as exaggeration, confusion, or, most likely, American psychological warfare. "A single bomb cannot destroy a city," one general said, adjusting his sword at his side. "Americans exaggerate everything," another added. Someone even joked that perhaps Hiroshima had finally paid the price for poor air raid discipline. Outside that room, the empire was already dying. Inside it, the men who had led Japan into the most catastrophic war in its history still believed they had time. They were wrong. And within hours, a man would walk into that room, burned, half-blind, shaking, carrying with him the truth of Hiroshima, a truth so horrifying that laughter would vanish forever. The world before the flash. By the summer of 1945, World War II had become a war without mercy. Europe had already fallen silent. Hitler was dead. Berlin was rubble. The United States, victorious in the West, now turned its full attention to the Pacific, where Japan, though battered, refused to surrender. American planners faced a nightmare scenario: Operation Downfall, the invasion of the Japanese home islands. Estimates predicted hundreds of thousands of American casualties and possibly millions of Japanese deaths. Japan's military leadership had no intention of surrendering. Cities were burning nightly under firebombing campaigns. Tokyo itself had suffered one of the deadliest air raids in human history in March 1945. Yet the Imperial Army still spoke of honor, sacrifice, and a final decisive battle. They believed that if they could make the cost high enough, the Americans would negotiate. They had no idea the rules of war had already changed. The secret that changed history. Thousands of miles away in the deserts of New Mexico, a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen was nearing completion. The Manhattan Project was not just a military program, it was a scientific gamble with civilization itself. Physicists, engineers, and chemists raced against time, driven by the fear that Nazi Germany might develop the same weapon first. On July 16, 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the desert sky turned white. The Trinity test had succeeded. J. Robert Oppenheimer, watching the fireball rise, recalled an ancient line from the Bhagavad Gita: "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." President Truman was informed days later. The decision that followed would define the modern age. Japan would be warned, then Japan would be destroyed. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima was not Japan's largest city. It was not its most famous, but it was strategically important, an industrial hub, a military logistics center, and largely untouched by previous bombings. At 8:15 a.m., the B-29 bomber Enola Gay released a single bomb nicknamed Little Boy. 43 seconds later, the world ended. A blinding flash hotter than the surface of the sun erupted above the city. Buildings vaporized. Shadows of human beings burned into stone walls. A shockwave flattened everything within miles. In an instant, tens of thousands were dead. But Tokyo did not know this yet. Confusion in the capital. Initial reports reaching Tokyo were fragmented. Communications with Hiroshima abruptly stopped. Telegraph lines went dead. Military radio signals vanished. Reconnaissance aircraft reported severe damage, but nothing specific. At Imperial General Headquarters, officers debated the cause. Another large firebomb raid, one general suggested. Perhaps a fuel depot explosion, another guessed. Someone even joked that perhaps Hiroshima had finally paid the price for poor air raid discipline. Outside that room, the empire was already dying. Inside it, the men who had led Japan into the most catastrophic war in its history still believed they had time. They were wrong. And within hours, a man would walk into that room, burned, half-blind, shaking, carrying with him the truth of Hiroshima, a truth so horrifying that laughter would vanish forever. The man who walked out of hell. His name was Yoshio Nishina, Japan's leading nuclear physicist, or, depending on historical accounts, another figure, a Hiroshima survivor, military officer, or scientist, dispatched urgently to Tokyo after witnessing the devastation firsthand. He had traveled through a landscape that no longer looked like Earth. Where streets had been, there was glass. Where people had stood, there were stains. Where a city had lived, there was only silence. His skin was blistered, his uniform was torn, his eyes struggled to focus. When he entered the room, conversation stopped. Without raising his voice, he spoke. Hiroshima is gone. Not damaged, not burning. Silence ruled the room. Not the comfortable silence of men thinking, but the suffocating kind, where every breath feels like an admission of failure. The generals stared at the man who had walked in from the ruins of Hiroshima. His words hung in the air like poison gas, invisible yet impossible to ignore. One of the older officers finally spoke. "You are saying," he began slowly, "that a single bomb did what thousands of aircraft could not?" The man nodded. Yes. Another general slammed his fist on the table. "Impossible. Even America cannot defy the laws of physics." The visitor met his eyes. "They didn't defy physics," he said. "They mastered it." The science Japan underestimated. Japan was not ignorant of atomic theory. Before the war, Japanese physicists had studied atomic theory. Yoshio Nishina, often called the father of Japanese nuclear physics, had worked with Niels Bohr in Copenhagen. Japan even ran its own limited atomic research program, NIGO project, but it was underfunded, fragmented, and crippled by wartime shortages. The generals had believed the bomb was a myth because they wanted it to be. Nishina now explained what Hiroshima meant. This was not explosive force alone. This was atomic disintegration, energy released from the nucleus of matter itself. The weapon did not merely destroy, it changed the environment. People who had survived the blast were now dying mysteriously. Their hair fell out, their skin blackened, they vomited blood. "This sickness," Nishina said quietly, "will continue." The room grew colder. Word reached Emperor Hirohito that afternoon. Unlike the generals, the emperor did not laugh. Hirohito was a trained marine biologist. He understood science better than most military leaders around him. When his aides explained the atomic bomb, he asked precise, terrifying questions. How many such bombs do the Americans have? Can our cities survive another? Can our people? No one could answer. For the first time in his reign, Hirohito confronted a reality beyond Bushido, beyond sacrifice, beyond honor. Japan was not losing a war. Japan was facing extinction. August 7th, 1945. Denial turns to fear. Despite Hiroshima, the Supreme War Council remained divided. 3 members argued for surrender. 3 argued for continued resistance. They proposed absurd conditions: no occupation, no disarmament, preservation of military leadership, absolute protection of the emperor. America would accept none of them. Still, the generals clung to hope. Maybe Hiroshima was a one-time weapon. Maybe America was bluffing. Maybe the Soviet Union could be persuaded to mediate peace. Then the unthinkable happened. August 8th, 1945. The Soviets strike. At midnight, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. Within hours, Soviet forces smashed into Japanese positions in Manchuria, obliterating the Kwantung Army, once the pride of the empire. Japan's last diplomatic fantasy died that night. They were now surrounded, burned from the air, crushed from the land, and threatened by a weapon that could erase cities. August 9th, 1945. Nagasaki.
Still, no decision had been made.